This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into Bartholomew Town's continuing coverage of the impact of COVID-19 here in Rhode Island. I'm Bill Bartholomew. On this episode, a conversation with Kathy Cloutier and Mike Chea of the Dorcas International Institute of Rhode Island on significant gaps in communication by Rhode Island's administration when it comes to reaching Rhode Island's vast diversity of ethnic communities. Well, let's get right into the thick of the conversation here, which is that we've heard a lot about testing. We've heard a lot about outreach. We obviously have daily press conferences with the governor. But one area that's been kind of overlooked is really mobilizing and reaching out to the vast majority of languages other than Portuguese, Spanish, English, and American Sign Language.
Right.
And of course, here in some of these zip codes that are most impacted, many people either don't speak English at all or Spanish, Portuguese, or American Sign Language, and they're not getting the information that they need. And as a result, we're overlooking a huge portion of the susceptible population. As a result, this may render much of the data inaccurate. So Dorcas is certainly on the front lines of this on a regular basis. I guess let's get into your perspective on where we're at and what needs to be done to accommodate the many, many Rhode Islanders that are not being reached in this communication strategy by the governor's office.
Yeah, it's so one of the things, so what we've had to do is to actually go out into the community, and we have some community health workers who are trained. They're former refugees who've been trained as certified community health workers, but they can not only just translate language, but translate the cultural implications of the information they're sharing. And so we've deployed our community health workers out to their ethnic communities in order to share both information about the social distancing and the hand washing and how to protect yourself against the virus, and then what to do if you do have symptoms and where to go. And we've also been trying to translate as many materials as we can, create some videos, multilingual videos that we share. But our website and our social media isn't necessarily where the community comes, right? It's just, I'd like to think we're popular, but we're, so we've reached out to our nonprofit network to let them know as well that we will translate any of their materials into however many languages they need for free, as long as it's COVID-19 related, basically, which is kind of our way of saying we can't hold all the information, but you know what you want people to know about what your services are. So we're letting folks know that. We're doing that as well for the nonprofit community. But what I think we found most effective is reaching out to communities by people that they trust. So some of the ethnic nonprofit organizations, ethnic community nonprofit organizations, or others who have leadership roles within the community, we find that if we can arm them with information, then they're best to get it out. They know who needs it, and they also have some respect within the community as being trustworthy. But it's hard. It's time and effort, and it's actually getting out. It's not sitting on the phone. We find it very difficult to get a hold of folks by virtue of telephone, unless it's actually coming from our office. But if people are calling. So that wasn't a very good answer to your question.
That was a great answer, actually. Yeah, it was an awesome answer.
Yeah.
What have you heard back from some of these community leaders about once that information is delivered by a trusted source? Does that change the perspective of many people who have maybe been left out of the conversation prior to that community leader bringing the news to them?
What it's actually done, frankly, is, how they say ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
It's actually frightened people more. And that the fear is really, and again, many of the folks have come from difficult circumstances. If they're refugees, they fled, all kinds of trauma and bad circumstances. But there was a quote that one of our community health workers shared with us that the whole time that they were in their home country in the middle of war, they could see the enemy. And this is the fear was coming from the fact that they couldn't see the enemy, that this was an invisible enemy that they were needing to fight, and that left them feeling much more helpless than when they could. And I just thought that was fascinating. I think we've all thought that, like who on the street is carrying the virus, and how am I going to? But it was. I do think it created fear much more than reassurance. But I think we all had to process that. So when we maybe heard earlier, but we had to go through that same process ourselves.
It's almost like, this cycle of experience that we've gone through when that first, when many people first heard about the virus emerging in Wuhan and then expanding throughout Southeast Asia. And then all of a sudden it's in Italy and in Spain. And then next thing you know, the governor calls a press conference on a Sunday morning, and guess what? It's here in East Providence or Pawtucket, whatever it was. That all of a sudden gave Rhode Islanders, I guess, writ large, a chance to pause and reflect and say, wow, this is an invisible enemy, and how do we deal with this besides, even before really the idea of masks and so on and so forth, Right. But there are plenty of people who are now 2 months into this experience just getting their first impressions of what's happening. And as a result, my sense is that many of those who may have been exposed to the virus literally are now just getting that information. And in terms of testing and other data points, it's hard to evaluate what's going on because we're 2 months behind in many communities that are simultaneously amongst the most vulnerable because of their pre-existing living condition or the nature of the beast here in society. So it's a big problem.
I would agree with that. And then there's a whole group of folks who don't have health insurance or don't feel like they have access to health care. So even when they were sick, they weren't necessarily thinking that they had anywhere where they could go with that. So I agree with you. I think our numbers are going to be, and I'd say that across the country, the numbers are going to be much higher. Actual numbers will be much higher than we've ever been able to track.
I think so too. I mean, we're seeing the hospitalization rate expanded going retroactively to March 15th. The Department of Health put out another set of data, or I guess they just updated their data, and it's increased the number of hospitalizations. They're saying, well, that's criteria. Now we're counting if someone came in for a sprained ankle and they ended up catching COVID in the hospital. We're counting that in the data. But the reality is that there's way more cases than they had accounted for. And as we move towards phase 1, quote unquote, the testing the waters phase, which is supposed to start in eight days, I guess, and reopening, you get the sense that there are plenty of people here in the urban core, perhaps outside, that have not had the opportunity to even wrap their heads around what's going on. And that's just totally unacceptable.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
What about the fact that I got tested myself? I've shared this experience. I was tested maybe 2.5 weeks ago or so, and I was sent to the CCRI site. I had some symptoms. It turned out I ended up testing negative. It was probably, frankly, my doctor said it could have been something else viral or it could have been a panic attack, which is truly, the brain can play tricks on you. But I noticed when I pulled in that the National Guard presence, it was unnerving to me. Men in fatigues and baklavas and cones and signage and so on and so forth. And I remember when I placed my driver's license up against the window to verify who I was, I could see my hand shaking. Now I've been in, my wife's Brazilian. I've spent time in South America. I've dealt with, patrolling military police and so on and so forth. And to think that was happening in my own country, I couldn't even imagine someone who has immigration concerns or any other concerns saying, let me drive into that site. So do you sense that we need walk-up testing, whatever type of mobile testing that is a softer type of interface, that just saying, look, ICE isn't going to be involved in this, the police aren't involved in this, isn't enough for a lot of members of the disenfranchised population to feel comfortable with the testing process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I do know Department of Health had reached out to us several weeks ago to see if we would be open to using our location as a walk-up testing site. I think they ended up going with Bailey Elementary School on the south side, but they were really trying to target a walk-up site that was familiar, trusted, familiar, safe place for some folks. However, I do think that what's missing in all of that is, again, having information translated so that people know what's going to happen or what they need to, what they can expect when they show up at a testing site, right? Because I think if you're forewarned that this is what's going to happen, but it's not, this isn't ICE, this isn't police, this is just soldiers helping, or I don't know how to explain it, but I think that would have been really helpful for everybody, just to, if you knew what to expect, then you wouldn't quite have been as nervous. And I think, again, with the just the instructions in terms of, when to park and when to wait and what to do, I think there should really have been signs in multiple languages put up so that people aren't rolling down their window by mistake and then getting yelled at by somebody who looks like a soldier.
No question about it. I mean, this is basic stuff to me. And again, this isn't to throw the governor under the bus and say, they've done an awful job or but the idea is that I'm surprised that nobody, I'm sure someone thought of this, but I'm surprised no one said, let's get infographics made in whatever number of languages. Let's get, as you say, spokespeople in the communities, and let's find a way to soften that. Even if you have military fatigue, men and women in fatigues, but then alongside them you have people in civilian clothes or doctor, they're wearing scrubs or whatever it is, just to soften a little bit. I just personally found it, and I could see my hand move, trembling, like, oh wow, am I going to do something wrong and end up in the military police here? I'm now a bioterrorist.
Right.
Holy Moses! So
haul me off to quarantine because I rolled down my window before I should. Yeah,
right. It's totally legitimate. What would be your estimate of the number of languages that are spoken as the primary household language here in Rhode Island? It definitely exceeds 50, right?
Yeah, it likely does. I know our Pinpoint Translation Services has interpreters that interpret in 65 languages. So my guess is there's at least 65. We do translations in 85. We have access to 200, but I'm thinking of the folks we've trained because those are the most requested languages. So I'd say probably 65, if not more. I mean, there's some common languages. Many folks, I find, at least many of our clients are multilingual, so they may know, Urdu and Arabic. So translating in Arabic would be sufficient for those folks, that kind of thing. But
right, what's the most difficult part in this in Rhode Island? I grew up in South County, then I lived in New York for a decade, and when I moved back to Rhode Island, I was in Newport, and now I'm in Providence, and I mean, I spent my whole youth I grew up, my family was also on Elmwood Avenue, so I'm familiar with the region, so to speak. But what's your message? Because I get all this feedback on my Facebook page from people in Westerly and people in Chariho, where I grew up, saying this is a hoax. There's no cases, that this is, that there's no reason for this pandemonium, and so on and so forth. What's your message to those folks that, about the community here in Providence that hasn't even necessarily gotten the message yet about this outbreak?
Wow, that's interesting. I've often thought there are two Rhode Islands, right? There's the urban Rhode Island and the more rural Rhode Island, and it really is two very different lifestyles or lives, if you will. And I would, it's interesting because when this first, beginning of March, first few weeks of March, I was one of those people saying, oh, what's so, it's just like the flu, it's this and that, and everything. And I do think I would say to those folks that it really is real, that, the numbers aren't lying, that this is really happening. And yes, one of the reasons you're lucky enough to be in Westerly where there aren't a lot of cases is because we're locked down and we're social distancing and that kind of thing. But I don't know how to get that across other than believing the statistics or believing the. I don't know, Mike. If this is Mike, Bill.
Mike, well, thanks for hopping on. Appreciate it.
Bill, I apologize.
Oh, it's all good. These are busy times here. I mean, we're all, the work you're doing, the work that Dorcas does is, it's critical infrastructure. So, I mean, no worries at all. Thanks for making some time here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Mike, we're talking about, how there's folks in Rhode Island that don't even really believe there's, anything really going on here in terms of pandemic. And I remember Mike shared with me how members of the Cambodian community were just like, blowing it off. I don't know if they've changed at all. Have they, Mike?
Oh, well, they started to change a little bit because a second store employee was tested positive. So now the Cambodian community are very, very, very wary about this whole pandemic. So they're taking it a little bit more seriously than it first started. In the beginning, they was like, whatever, it's just another virus that we pass through. But as they see that it's impacting their community a little bit, they started to take it more seriously.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's going to come down to, is that firsthand experience and then wrapping your head around. And that goes for Westerly as well, because they've had cases there. And, there's a lot of cavalier, and I hate to single Westerly out, but I mean, that is generally speaking the region that I'm getting this pushback from. Westerly, Charahoe, the Exeter, West Greenwich, where there aren't a lot of cases, but there's also not a lot of understanding of the dynamic of the state. From your perspective, Mike, specifically, broadly speaking, with the Southeast Asian communities here and the lack of translation and infographics and interpretation that we've seen coming, I guess there really has been anything coming from the governor's office. Has that had a severe impact on the delay in response that is inevitably happening right now amongst that broad community?
It does. It does have a delay, especially until today. I still not have seen one Cambodian community member stepped up to take charge of this whole pandemic. It's just there's no one stepping up. I'm not sure if now they're scared or what it is. It's first the lack of communication from the governor's office in their native language, and then on top of that, there's no one from the Cambodian community that steps up, that they look up to for information. And they're both silent, so the community members themselves are in the dark, basically, not knowing what's going on or understanding a little bit of what was said by the governor, and then information are passed from one person to another person, and then misunderstandings happens because of that initial misunderstanding, and then it just spreads like wildfire. So if we have more support from the governors, where they take these ethnic group and just appoint someone, or at least have someone, or encourage someone to step up and be a leader of that community, it will definitely help the community members.
And I suppose that would be the same for other communities of ethnic identity across the state. Do you feel like we need, I guess this is a question for each of you, do you feel like we need task force or a task force that is hyper-focused on outreach into various ethnic communities immediately here in the state?
I would say that's a great idea if we could do that. I had hoped that Department of Health would have recognized, the various ethnic makeup, if you will, and to reach out to the communities. I was talking with, or we were on the call the other day, Mike, with providers of state agency, the Buddha state agency, and they were actually also recognizing that the state has been far behind in terms of really doing outreach within the ethnic communities to let people know not just what's going on with regard to the pandemic, the virus, but what resources are available in behavioral health and substance support. So there was some acknowledgement that they're far behind, and they were reaching out to us to find out how we could work together to get that information out. So hopefully, if there were some sort of a task force that was their role, I think it would happen much more quickly than, I don't know what your thoughts are, Mike.
Well, I've been in video conference call with the Highlander hotline every morning. It seems that the number is going up a little bit. They are trying to get the community aware of this available hotline. They started by translating a few documents, but still, it's just that majority of the callers are still English speaking, and out of 106 calls that they received since it first started, only about 16 are from the Hispanic community. Yeah. And the other thing is that a few days ago, I believe I heard the governor was saying that they lack the ability of translating her updates to different languages. We have reached out to them, but unfortunately, they have not responded to my email. Hopefully, they will contact us and we'll be able to help them get the wording out to the community that are not really being heard.
That's so you're saying you in the capacity through Dorcas have reached out to the governor's office, offering to create the translated version of the press conference or outreach, whatever they're calling it, the daily announcement, and they just haven't gotten back to you at all?
Right, I haven't, not the governor's office directly. I do contacted the other department. I contacted my contact at the health department and have them forward my messages, but none of them has responded to my email.
Wow, that's something that has to be brought up immediately. I'll make sure that on the press conference, I'll ask, have you heard from anybody that has offered outreach about translation services and see what they have to say,
I participate in the Friday afternoon community partner calls with the Department of Health and the emergency management folks. And I did submit information about our pinpoint translation services, and that we will translate materials or do interpreting if there's a need. And I also let them know that to get out to the other nonprofits that we're doing the free translation of materials. But I didn't hear, again, they didn't get that out to the network either. So I don't know whether they don't know what to do with it. I don't know what's happening there, why they're not responding.
Wow.
Thanks for mentioning, Kathy. I was going to ask if you mentioned that. But yeah, we are providing free translation services to nonprofit organizations that is COVID-19 related.
Yeah, that is shocking. I mean, it's. I know that they're overwhelmed. Obviously, I mean, there's again, it's not rooted in evil. This isn't a what is she doing type of thing. It's just wow. I'm surprised that's not a priority. I guess my last question for each of you would be: where can anyone out there who is seeking information about Dorcas or wants to get involved and sort of direct their energy or other people's energy and resources into the ethnic communities that have been left in the dark here in this conversation, how can people get a hold of you, and what can someone do if, like, here we go for the fifth time or whatever, someone in Westerly right now that's hearing this and is horrified about this reality, has that aha moment and says, okay, yeah, maybe our community, quote unquote, has a very minimal impact, but I want to get involved and in any way, shape, or form help contain and also get information out in the state as a whole?
Well, we always say, just in terms of how folks can help, I think it's getting the word out. We are delivering food boxes and those kinds of things. So we are still looking for volunteers. We do have virtual volunteerism where we're trying to make outreach calls, phone calls to various of our clients and others in the community for a variety of ways, either to check in, see how things are going, let them know about testing sites, and or we've got another group doing census phone calls, letting folks know that the census is still accepting their. So we do have volunteer opportunities as well. I think, and again, for those folks who are in the communities, if they were interested in helping us help them, provide the resources for them to get out and let their communities know to step up and take a leadership role, that'd be awesome too. I don't know, Mike, you have some thoughts?
For the translation piece, if anyone knows of anyone that is interested in translation that is COVID-19 related, like I mentioned earlier, Kathy mentioned earlier, we can do it for free. Please visit our website, www.pinpointlanguage.com, and click on get the translation quote or translation request and submit the request through that link. And again, it's secure, and we will do the translation for free.
Yeah. And I always forget to mention our website. So our Dorcas International's website is DIIRI.org. And there's all kinds of information up there, as well as if folks are interested in helping out, there's they can just submit an interest form, and we'll follow up with them there too.
Well, a sincere honor to have you on the program, honestly, and keep up the work you're doing. And I hope that this reaches more people and gets to the administration's office. And, if we're going to open up the state on May 8th, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do this coming week. There's no doubt about it. And it's not going to be easy.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey, this is episode 200 of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. Who would have guessed we would have made it this far together? Thanks so much for your time and attention, support. And remember, there's 199 other episodes there for you to check out on your favorite podcast app or ripodcast.com.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits. And 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.